If you need a window today into the Republican Party's complete capitulation to Trump's most dangerous and anti-democratic impulses, their acquiescence to Trump this week as he parrots Putin's lies about Ukrainian President Zelensky is all you need to take in. Donald Trump openly musing that Ukraine, not Russia, started the war in Ukraine, calling President Zelensky an unelected dictator, casually undoing nearly a century of American foreign policy, that has not led to a stampede of Republicans demanding an audience with the president at the White House to try to persuade Trump or Vance or anybody else that Zelensky is the true American ally. Or as Lindsey Graham said to Zelensky 6 years ago to his face, quote, the best kind of ally for fighting Russia so we don't have to, end quote, tells you everything. As the cover of The Economist puts it, this is, quote, Europe's worst nightmare. And it may become America's worst nightmare as well, quickly. Americans have gotten very clear very fast on how they feel about it. 61% of all Americans disagree with Trump's version of events, which is a lie. They understand that, no, it was Russia that actually started the war. 81% of Americans say Putin should not be trusted, including a whopping 73% of all Republicans. And yet, even with this sudden burst of Americans saying, no, thank you, we don't want this, we didn't vote for this, Trump and his administration show no signs of reconsidering throwing Ukraine under the bus and driving America off a diplomatic cliff. Reuters is reporting that the U.S., quote, is refusing to co-sponsor a draft UN resolution marking 3 years since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. That resolution backs Ukraine's territorial integrity and again demands Russia withdraw its troops, two sources telling Reuters this, quote, Washington has also objected to a phrase in a statement the group of 7 nations was planning to issue next week that would condemn Russian aggression. Let that sink in. Today, Trump's national security advisor warned Zelensky and Ukraine to, quote, tone it down. J.D. Vance said out loud, quote, I really believe we're on the cusp of peace in Europe, end quote. And then there was the abrupt and unexplained cancellation of what was supposed to be a joint press conference following a meeting between Ukrainian President Zelensky and Trump's U.S. envoy to Ukraine, a meeting in which they were meant to discuss paths to ending the war that would safeguard Ukraine's interest. There was also hope that it might help diffuse tensions. It was scrapped. Whether any progress was made remains unclear. A news conference scheduled for after the meeting was canceled at the request of the U.S. Reporters who had gathered for the news conference were told to go home. Washington Post is reporting that as Zelensky and the U.S. envoy stood together, not for a press conference, but a photo op, quote, as the cameras clicked around the two men, Zelensky responded to the question on how he was doing by describing himself in a, quote, fighting spirit. Fighting spirit might be the only thing that stands between us and total capitulation. Here's how former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger puts it today, quote, there was a time not too long ago when America stood as the beacon of freedom, the defender of democracy, the steadfast ally of those who resisted oppression. Yet today, as I watch the behavior of our political leaders, the comments of an ever increasingly unhinged Trump, and the growing indifference of many Americans toward our role in the world, I have to ask a painful question. Are we now the bad guys? The shift isn't just concerning, it's dangerous. The world is watching. Our allies in Europe and Asia are questioning whether they can count on us, whether America still means what it says. Our adversaries, Putin, Xi, and every dictator with territorial ambitions are licking their chops, waiting for America to fully turn inward, to abandon its role as the leader of the free world. Quote, so I ask again, are we the bad guys? End quote. Are we? It's where we start today with Bill Browder, CEO of Hermitage Capital Management and head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign, which seeks to expose corruption and is named in honor of a Kremlin critic, Sergei Magnitsky, who died in a Russian prison. We've wanted to talk to you for days now, and it feels like all of this is as public-facing as it's been. Both Trump's embrace of Putin's view of the war in Ukraine, of course, started by Putin, and the Republican Party's complete capitulation to things they said 48, 72 hours ago when it comes to how they see Putin, the way, a lot of ways similar to how normal people, how you and I see Putin, but nothing, not a word, not a peep, not a meeting, not a face-to-face with Trump to slow this down. Where are we heading?
We're heading to a not good place, is my prediction. We have really an unbelievable situation. I mean, the one that particularly got me was the U.S. as a member of the G7 doesn't want to call out Russian aggression on the third anniversary of the war. I mean, that's not a very hard thing to do, and that's something that everybody has done. That's sort of stating the obvious, and so I'm very worried. I'm very worried for Ukraine. I'm very worried for Europe. And I'm very worried, as you said, for what this does to encourage other dictators around the world, because the whole point is that if there was a consequence to Putin, then there would be a consequence to the Chinese if they wanted to take over Taiwan and various other bad actors. And so this is a very worrying moment. And I can only hope that the circumstances don't turn out as bad as they look at this present time.
Just so people understand the significance of refusing to sponsor a UN resolution, which is respectfully, I guess, to the UN, really just a statement of alliances. To refuse to sign on to a UN resolution is almost an unnecessary an intentional step to take, to step away from Ukraine if you wanted to. How is that seen inside Ukraine?
I'm sure that everybody in Ukraine right now is just trying to imagine what the world will be like when Russia takes over. I mean, what's happened effectively in the last week or so is that America has abandoned Ukraine. Somehow, Ukraine is the bad guy. The victim is the bad guy, and the aggressor is the good guy. And it's just impossible for anybody who cares about Ukraine and for anyone who cares about trying to stop Putin to watch this happening in real time from the most powerful country in the free world, the United States. Now, the one thing I can say, which perhaps is a tiny bit of comfort, is that when Putin invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, everybody thought they were a goner, that the Russians would be there in 3 days and that would be the end of the story. And they fought back valiantly and they fought back hard. And we're now 3 years into this thing, and Russia still hasn't gotten what they wanted. And so I wouldn't write Ukraine off in any way. And I would also point out that while Trump may be abandoning Ukraine, Europe has definitely not abandoned Ukraine. And putting aside the hyperbole of Trump, Europe has actually given Ukraine more financial and military support in dollar terms than the United States. And so it's not a binary thing. It's not black and white, but it's certainly very troubling if the United States steps away and sort of gives Putin the green light to do whatever he wants over there.
I've been thinking over the last 10 days about covering Bucha and about coming on the air and interviewing U.S. national security officials who were in tears, were emotional, just talking about Bucha and the brutality that the Russians carried out against civilians in Bucha, in I think the first year of the Ukraine war. I think we learned weeks later that those soldiers who sadistic, I think doesn't begin to capture it, sadistically tortured and killed Ukrainians were awarded the highest medals by Vladimir Putin. And I want to read you what's happening in Bucha right now from the New York Times. Quote, Bucha has become a notorious symbol of Russian brutality. The Russians took it over within days of invading. And in the month that followed, they killed more than 400 civilians, according to Ukrainian officials, leading to global accusations of war crimes. Images from that time ricocheted around the world. The priest left dead in a garage, his mouth open. The church choir singer and his family, their limbs cut off, their bodies burned. The woman shot dead pushing her bicycle home. Many people in Bucha seem to be struggling to take in Donald Trump's comments. Quote, now he's going to help the Russians, asked one woman. They destroyed everything here. And now we're supposed to give up? How does that work? Then she answered her own question. If America leaves us, we are screwed, end quote.
Yeah.
What are
It's
Americans left to
it's
think
very-
about brutality and about war crimes carried out by someone Trump can't cozy up next to fast enough?
This is a stain on America. It's an unbelievable betrayal of freedom-loving people who have fought for their freedom, fought for democracy. You know, we're supposed to be, as you read from that quote from Adam Kinzinger, the good guys, but now all of a sudden, America is siding with the dictator. It's unimaginable. And I should point out that all those people in Bucha and other places, if this happens, if Ukraine is forced into a surrender to Putin, they're not going to stick around in Ukraine, and Europe is going to end up with 15 or 20 million Ukrainian refugees fleeing the Russian brutality, and that's going to set off a whole new chain reaction of events. It's truly hard to imagine how everything has changed so dramatically in such a terrible way in such a short period of time.